Minister Netanyahu, you just mentioned Iran. Did you discuss Iran?
Very
Did you
well.
discuss
the
Gaza war?
Yeah, we discussed a lot of things, and it went very well, very smooth. We'll see what happens. You know, we're trying to do something with a country we just spoke about, Iran. I think you should negotiate this. You might be better. I think I'm going to send you today. What a good idea. This could have been the idea of the day. We'll have Derek get up and negotiate. They are good negotiators, but they're tough. Sometimes they can be too tough. That's the problem. So we're trying to make a deal so that there's no destruction and death. And we've told them that, and I've told them that, and I hope that's the way it works out. But it might not work out that way. We'll soon find out. Yeah, please.
Prime Minister. Off with Iran. The International Atomic Energy Agency stunned the international community last week when a research document it delivered revealed that it possesses unequivocal evidence that Iran carried out a series of experiments involving the initiation and the detonation of a nuclear device, a process very close to the final stage of developing an atomic bomb. These experiments took place way back in 2003, and in a special report published by the agency on May 31st, it was disclosed that Iran conducted internal implosion tests, entirely militarily experiments with no civilian use. Such tests are considered an essential step in developing a nuclear warhead, but the report adds that they were performed without disclosure in violation of Iran's commitments under the international agreements. And according to the new report that was released recently and examined, amongst others, by the Institute for Science and International Security, this is a think tank, a significant portion of the agency's findings relies on intelligence materials obtained by the Israeli Mossad as part of the 2018 operation to seize Iran's nuclear archive in Tehran. The report notes that Iran conducted explosive tests on neutron-initiating systems produced at the Lavizan Shihan site, with the experiments carried out at least twice in February and also in July of 2003. This is clearly military technology with no known civilian applications. In addition, evidence was found of another explosive test at the Marivan site in April 2003, in which similar neutron monitoring systems were integrated. Beyond the tests themselves, the report provides new details on equipment and materials that are located at the Varmin site, where contaminated UF cylinders, uranium extraction materials, fluorine chemicals, and radiation monitoring equipment were found. And according to the findings, the Iranian authorities classified the equipment in two categories: essential and non-essential. 5 cylinders were deemed essential, one of which contained the highest level of contamination, including small UF cylinders and other special materials. The report further revealed that additional sites, Lavizan Shihan, Marivan, and Varmin, were part of a secret organized nuclear program, with some materials and equipment transferred to the Turkuz Abak. This is a site between 2009 and 2018, after which their whereabouts are unknown. The agency also points to a direct connection between the 4 sites and the missing nuclear materials based on new intelligence assessments. And according to the report, Iran continues its efforts to obscure its nuclear activities, cleaned sites before inspectors' visits, and at times presented false or even contradictory information. The agency stresses that these explanations severely complicate the investigation process, and although some issues are now considered not outstanding, the IAEA clarifies that this does not indicate full resolution of the matter. The findings were revealed against the backdrop of advanced yet fragile contacts between Iran and the United States in an attempt to reach a new nuclear agreement, alongside the possibility of talks collapsing. This is a scenario that could escalate into military confrontation, including a potential Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. The Institute for Science and International Security is currently calling on the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency leadership, to refer Tehran's violations to an urgent discussion in the UN Security Council. The discussions were expected to open on Monday and continue until the 13th of June. So guys, here at TBN Israel, we will keep reporting on every development concerning Iran and its intent to obtain nuclear weapons.
What is the fact that Iran has enough enriched uranium for possibly more than 10 nuclear warheads mean for the world? And a lot more that's coming down the pipeline on this topic. Welcome to the TBN Boots on the Ground Live. Heard in a recent report by the IAEA, which is the International Agency of Atomic Energy, if I got that correctly, stating that the Iranians have enough enriched uranium to create 10 nuclear warheads. Now, that uranium isn't enriched yet to the level of weapons-grade uranium. We'll talk about that later on. But what they do is they have enough enriched uranium to the level of 60% to make at least 10 warheads. And more alarmingly, they're enriching uranium in their different centrifuge facilities to the tune of one more bomb per month. Now that's a lot. One bomb a month is a lot of bombs, especially when it's in the hands of the Iranians. So a lot has been going on in that. This is a warning that comes out from the IAEA, which is a semi-neutral, let's call it there, on the side of the West. But they're not related to Israel in any way, shape, or form. They come out about a week and a half or maybe 2 weeks ago now with a very loud warning saying Iran has a lot more enriched uranium than we expected, and they're enriching faster and to a higher grade than what we previously knew, and they're doing that in places that are undisclosed to us, and it's almost impossible for us to track everything that they're doing. In fact, we've sort of given up on it. At the same time, the US, the IAEA, several other countries in the West are putting a ton of pressure on the Iranians, saying we might be seeing a quick snapback of the sanctions that were imposed on them to the tune of what existed back in 2015 to make sure that they have maximum pressure on them to prevent them from making a push for a bomb. Russia, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, you guys tell me, suddenly is not sure that this is the right thing to do now with the Iranians. Perhaps we shouldn't escalate the situation with them. Heaven forbid we want to put sanctions on a country that's pushing for a bomb and is the sworn enemy of Israel and the West. But, you know, go figure. Another headline is that yesterday, Monday night, President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu had about a 40-minute phone call talking about Iran, talking about the agreement with Hamas, talking through how we don't allow Iran to reach a point of no return when it comes to nuclear capabilities. And then, of course, as usual, I guess, the Iranians threaten to retaliate. They threaten to attack. They threaten to unleash. They have these very, very plural languages that they use to unleash fire, to unleash hell on Israel and on those who will attack the people of Iran. But again, it's sort of hard to separate the truth and imagination with some of the statements that they make. What's interesting is also they've made some really bold claims in the last week and a half or so, saying we were able to obtain documentation that has to do with the Israeli nuclear program. They haven't shown any evidence of that, but they've been claiming that time and time again. They've said also that they have classified information on the Israeli nuclear program, but all in all, it sounds like they are a drowning man reaching for whatever they can reach because pressure is mounting on them to an incredible degree, I think more than ever before. But all of that is under the headline, under the main topic, which we're going to be talking about, which is Iran has more enriched uranium at a higher grade and is doing so quicker than we previously knew. They have enough enriched uranium to create 10 nuclear warheads. And we're going to break that down in a sec. And they're enriching at the level of one more per month. And today we're going to discuss and try to understand where this is taking us. And I want to give two background points here. One, to explain how enriching uranium works, and two, to talk about the timeline here. And I'll start from the simple part, which is the timeline. But before we do that, welcome to anyone who's been joining us on this live feed. Let me look in StreamYard here. We have, wow, it's nice, almost 1,600 people that are watching us live. Thank you, Prodigal, for saying Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you, Monica, and good morning back to you in British Columbia, Canada. We have people from all around the world tuning in to enjoy or I don't know if we're enjoying talking about this, to hear about what's happening with Iran here in Israel. You know, disrespected. They're a serious adversary. They're a serious negotiator. They were in the past and they are still to this day. And I think the U.S. is in a different place. It's in a place where it's not just concerned with are they negotiating in good favor. I think they understand what they're really trying to do here. But the question is, can we get what we need or the minimum we need in the negotiation without taking military action? I think that's the play for the U.S. administration, more than do they understand that the Iranians are, you know, playing dirty in the negotiation, which I'm sure they do.
Other?
Yeah.
This is more of a comment, but I thought it would be interesting to hear your reaction.
The reason Israel won't strike Iran's nuclear program is Iran might just self-sabotage the areas and leak nuclear material, and everyone around the world will be affected. Well, no, I mean, that's an interesting comment, but not everyone around the world would be affected by a nuclear leak in Iran. I mean, the way a nuclear bomb works is it's effective for a specific area. Now, there are different types of nuclear bombs. If it's the old type, the type that was used in 1945 by the U.S. against the Japanese, that type of bomb has a lot of radioactive fallout and radioactive radiation that sort of travels around the region if a bomb is detonated. But what we know right now, and we'll get to that in a sec, is that the Iranians don't yet have the ability to create a bomb. What they have is enriched uranium, and enriched uranium in itself, without starting the chain reaction that is needed or that is necessary to really set off a bomb, is just radioactive in a small radius. It doesn't cause collateral damage to an area.
Only 1% of people know about this special cleaning product. Stop scrubbing your oven like it's nice.
Will there be a nuclear fallout after demolition? And that is part of why strikes have not happened yet. Praying for the peace of Jerusalem. So this is a similar question. No, there would be a small amount of nuclear fallout, but this is nothing like what you would see on television shows that talk about a nuclear winter and stuff like that. Those kind of levels of radiation, one, I'll say this, most, and again, I don't know what kind of warhead the Iranians are going to try to build, so it makes it impossible to speculate, but the type of nuclear warheads that most countries of the world use these days are different. They're or small tactical nukes, or they're more along the lines of what people call a hydrogen bomb, which is a slightly different variable of how nuclear warheads are created. Again, this gets a little technical, but there's variables in a nuclear bomb. Some of them are radiation, some of them are blast, some of them are the electromagnetic part of it, some of them are the heat, as in the infrared radiation that comes out of it. And most modern nuclear bombs are much higher on the blast and the heat than they are on just like the radioactive spectrum, as in like the ionizing radiation that is damaging to human bodies. So in that sense, what we see in like traditional movies where people thought, you know, there'd be a bomb would go off in like Moscow or somewhere in the U.S. and nuclear radiation would travel through the world, that's not what most bombs do nowadays. I honestly don't know what the Iranians are pushing for and don't have the technical knowledge on that to comment. But no, blowing up a nuclear facility in Iran would cause a localized issue. It wouldn't be a regional issue. We have room for one more question, then we'll explain how the Iranians are going to push for a bomb. Isn't every earthquake without aftershocks a Iran nuclear bomb test? Probably not. Probably not. So it's an interesting question, and it's a valid one. Most countries nowadays, so like back in the 50s when the U.S. and the Russians were on this never-ending race to stockpile nuclear weapons, they would test nukes publicly in the Bikini Atoll and, you know, in the Pacific, and in, you know, the Russians would do it in big open areas, you know, in Siberia and other regions in the former Soviet Union. But then once the understanding of what the levels of radiation did to the region, once that came out and once that was understood, most countries started testing nukes underground. The North Koreans, for instance, did that. They test nukes underground, not above ground. And several other countries have done the same, solely for the purpose of not spreading radiation through the atmosphere. I think even many of the later Russian, like former Soviet Union, nuclear tests were done underground, so the radiation is contained and doesn't spread all around to that area. Look, nowadays there's a bunch of intelligence that's gathered about what the Iranians do. Some of it is thermal imaging. Some of it has to do with different wavelengths of light. Some of it has to do with seismographs, as in picking up on on earthquakes, etc. From what we know and what's been released to the public, the Iranians haven't tested a nuclear bomb. I believe that if they had done that, we would have already known that it happened. I feel like both Israel and the U.S. would have made that public because it would serve their interest. Hiding the fact that they have a bomb doesn't serve our interest at all. I think we'll take a pause. I want to explain some things that have to do with how pushing for a bomb goes. So again, we've talked about this in the past. Nuclear bombs have three components to them: enriched uranium, a warhead mechanism that blows it up in a very carefully orchestrated chain reaction, and a delivery mechanism, an intercontinental ballistic missile, a truck, an airplane, something that carries a payload that is a nuclear warhead to the destination. So let's break those down. The Iranians have enriched uranium at about 60%, and they have enough to create 10 bombs. But to get to bomb level enriched uranium isn't at 60%, it's at 90%. And enriching from that level to the next is done, without getting overly technical here, in what they call a cascade of centrifuges. And essentially, the enriched uranium is converted into a gas form. It's spun in a centrifuge, which spins at a very, very high rate. And then slightly they isolate the more highly active elements of it, and they do that in a sort of in a tier. They take one level of enrichment and further enrich and further enrich and further enrich. We're talking weeks, realistically, from 60% to 90%. And for all we know, it might have already happened. Maybe at a lesser degree, but it might have already happened. How do we know it didn't? We don't fully know. We do know that trace elements have been found indicating that they're at 60%. And I think it's an estimate saying that we're about at 10 warheads. So let's say they're a month away from, or 2 weeks, it doesn't really matter, away from enough enriched uranium to launch bombs. Then they need the warhead. Now the warhead is something that's carefully orchestrated. It needs to be able to launch it into the air and then in a very timely manner start a chain reaction that sets off the nuclear elements and creates a chain reaction that is known as an atomic explosion. And for what we know, the Iranians don't have that yet, but they are working on it. Then the third component is the delivery mechanism: an ICBM, an intercontinental ballistic missile, a ballistic missile, a airplane, a truck with a bomb, in the back of it, something like that. Well, the Iranians can't deliver physically to Israel in a truck. They don't have the Air Force to do that. What they do have is they have ICBMs, and they have enough enriched uranium that if they were to make that push, and if we saw what people were asking, a push for the bomb, where they have a test, where we see an explosion like people were just asking, where it goes off, well, then we know that they have a bomb, and we're in trouble. And by in trouble, I mean it changes the map of the Middle East for good. And that's a huge problem. And I think that too requires a bit of a breakdown. And I want to explain that. People might ask, and the Iranians would make this argument oftentimes, well, what do you care that we have a bomb? Israel has a bomb, allegedly. The U.S. has thousands of bombs. The Russians have tons of bombs. The UK has bombs. The French have bombs. The Indians have bombs. The Pakistani have bombs. The North Korean have bombs. Why can't we have a bomb? And the answer to that is, well, first of all, not all the other countries I mentioned should have a bomb. In fact, I think the world would be a better place without them. But that aside, and I think it's a difficult debate that many have debated in the past. That aside, North Korea having a bomb is exactly the case study that would show us that the Iranians shouldn't have a bomb. Now, let me explain that statement. There's two case studies, and I think we're going to do an explainer on this to a greater degree in a bit. Two case studies that have to do with nuclear weapons. One is Libya, and the other one is North Korea. Libya was en route, I guess, to having nuclear bombs. And Gaddafi, the dictator at the time, gave them up because he was promised, that he would be less of a pariah state, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, long story short, Gaddafi's no longer with us, and part of the reason is because the West helped topple his dictatorship when he showed weakness. And I'm not saying that's a wrong thing. That's the very right thing to do. But North Korea is the opposite story of that. They're a insane dictatorship led by a family of maniacal dictators, 3 generations deep into it, that has starved its people, tortured its people. The part to it which they just don't interest people enough. But the big piece here is that they have a nuclear bomb. And Iran looks at that and they say, we want that. We want to have a bomb and we want to be untouchable. Because when Iran has a bomb, suddenly Saudi isn't as powerful. And when Iran has a bomb, suddenly the threat of American attacks against the Iranians are not as scary. And Israeli Air Force attacks are less of an option. So we can't live with the option of the Iranians having a bomb. I'm going to go into that in further detail in just a sec, but I see that we have considerably more viewers than we did when we were getting started. So thank you to all of you who have joined us, to all the thousands watching us from around the world. We're here, boots on the ground, live from downtown Jerusalem, ongoing, fear almost of what's been happening here in this region, with direct U.S. negotiations, with Israel making threats, with the Iranians making threats. We're still at the same place. We're at a place where the Iranians are still threatening to create a bomb, and I want to be clear about who these people are. Since before I was born, which was a long time according to my kids, since before I was born, they've been threatening to destroy Israel and everything it stands with. And if you don't care about Israel, you should still care about this, because they've also been promising to destroy the U.S. and specifically Judeo-Christian values and the Western way of life. Not the Western way of life in the hedonistic type of way, in the freedom and liberty part of it, in the biblical part of it, in the Judeo-Christian values part of it. That's what they're coming after. So if it doesn't stop with Israel, it'll stop with you wherever you are around the world. These people mean business. They need to be taken at their word, and they need to be stopped. And better that it happens today versus at a later date. So we talked about Iran pushing for a nuclear bomb. We talked about the timeline on that. We might just be weeks away from them having enough enriched uranium at bomb grade level to then start assembling bombs. We don't know if they have the technology to create the warheads, but even if they don't, that's not that long to create. And I need to say that even if the timeline is 12 months, that's still alarming. Even if the timeline is 18 months, we still need to strike today. Today is the time to strike. Today is the time to take action against the Iranians. So we're here to answer your questions and answers. Drop a comment in the comment section. We're sifting through them right here in the studio. We've been talking about this a lot on the channel, and I've said this several times. The worst case scenario for this agreement is that it's a weak, toothless agreement that has loopholes in it. I mean, more than anything else, no agreement would be better than a weak agreement. An attack on Iran would be better than a weak agreement. The worst case scenario possibly is a weak agreement. Why is that? Because it leaves the Iranians without sanctions, so now they have cash and they're able to buy the parts that they need. It brings them back also sort of into the circle of like more acceptable countries. Then they can push full steam ahead towards a bomb. And the supervision mechanism would be weakened to the point where we would find out after the fact that they've already obtained military nuclear capabilities. So the details are really the important part here. And I have to say this, every time the U.S., and this has been months at this point of negotiations, every time the U.S. comes out and President Trump comes out and says, it's been an amazing negotiation, things have gone well, we're getting to this point, the Iranians immediately sort of backtrack and say, no, we're still going to continue enriching uranium. No, we're going to stockpile enriched uranium. But what's important to notice here is that multiple Western countries and the IAEA, the International Agency of Atomic Energy, they've all said, pay attention to the details. We need to be able to supervise every facility in Iran. I need to give an example of this. We need to be able to show up at a facility, knock on the door and say, hello, this is whatever supervision entity it is. We're here to check on whether or not there's a nuclear program taking place in this location. And they need to open the door to them and show them that there isn't. And without that, the Iranians can continue to push for a bomb. And let's be honest here. They've done this time and time again. They shouldn't have enriched uranium at 60%, and they have it because they've duped the international community time and time again, because they've entered into agreements and pulled out of agreements, and they've sort of haggled their way into a lack of supervision that's allowed them to enrich uranium to a greater degree than what was expected. And we can't remove the sanctions, and we can't have a weak agreement. The agreement needs to end with the fact that there are other people inspecting the Iranians on the ground and ensuring that they can't obtain nuclear military capability. And in fact, the Iranians don't need any kind of enriched uranium. Many mechanisms have been offered. I mean, I'd get blue in the face just trying to describe all the options that have come up. Third-party countries, the Saudis, giving them enriched uranium for civilian purposes, etc. Look, we don't need to beat around the bush. We know what's happening here. The Iranians are pushing for a bomb, and they're trying to drag out the time to the degree where they have enough enriched uranium where they become untouchable, because the international community fears that they've already reached military nuclear capability.
Why does anyone...
Social Intelligence Squad, great name. Are you not fearing the devastating counterattacks, or is it just a bluff? No, it's not a bluff. There will be counterattacks, and I'd say, and this we've been saying this, the Israeli government has been saying this for over a year now. Look, Iran has taken many, many blows in the last 12 months. Their Ring of Fire doctrine, Hezbollah, Hamas, Syria, Houthis, has been weakened dramatically. They're financially hard-pressed. Their air defenses have been weakened by Israeli attacks on Iran proper. Now is the time to attack, when their retaliatory attack is as weak as it possibly could be. If we wait 18 months, if we wait 12 months even, they might have more SAM sites. They might have another proxy force that they're able to raise. They might have more nuclear capabilities than what we know. There is no reason to wait. The response will be as weak as it possibly could be now, more than ever before. Next question. Israel doesn't need the U.S. military support for the strike, but isn't U.S. intelligence necessary? Yeah, good question. So one, Israel would love to have U.S. support on the strike. We would love to have support, be it in intelligence, in logistics, in airstrikes, in a guarantee of fighting off the attack that would happen. We need that help. We need that support. But Israel has said publicly, Prime Minister Netanyahu, Minister of Defense Katz, and before him, Minister of Defense Gallant, have said repeatedly that we will strike also without the aid of the U.S. If needed, because we can't live with the option of an Iranian strike. Even if we stop them, why couldn't they just buy one from Russia or China? Great question. They've tried many times to do exactly that, including buy one from the North Koreans, and they've been stopped. Russia and China don't live in a vacuum. And if they sell a bomb to the Iranians, the international community is going to know, and pressure has been put on them not to do that. They've tried to buy the know-how of how to do that with North Korean scientists, and that too has been stopped. Look, the Iranians are not, they're no suckers. They've been firing in every direction, trying to get a bomb. Next question.
He bought the knife just to...
Doesn't Witkoff has past business ties with Qatar? I don't know. Maybe. I think we need to research that. Many people have past business ties and present business ties with the Qataris. One of the Qataris' favorite games is to get everyone dirty in the mud. So much so to the point where it's hard to differentiate whether or not someone has been corrupted by them, contacted by them, or just completely innocent. They just throw mud in every direction, and they've been able to really cause a lot of drama, both in Israel and in other countries, with their dirty and corrupting influence.